It's Mailbag Friday on a Locked On Braves podcast. Got a lot of great questions out there from all of you on Twitter that I'm very excited to answer on today's podcast. Got a lot talking about prospects, which we're going to get into. Been watching a lot of video lately, so I'm really excited to dive into some of these prospects. Should be a very exciting shows. Always appreciate the questions coming in on this Mailbag Friday. So let's get into it.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your favorite teams every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on Twitter simply at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there if you would. See all the places that I am covering the game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves over at TomahawkTake.com. Also, please make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Trying to get to 1,000 followers there by the start of the season, making it a very interactive show. In fact, today's show is going to be brought to you strictly by the followers on Twitter, those who commented, sent in your questions. So you want to be a part of the podcast, follow us on Twitter, send in your questions, be happy to answer them on the podcast. That's what we'll be doing today. Also, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Doing very well over there, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers there as well by the beginning of the season. Working on my background here. If you're watching on YouTube, coming together, got some things coming in, some prints coming in that I'm going to post on the wall that I'm very excited about. So that's starting to come together a little bit as well. But if you are watching on YouTube, please stop what you're doing. Go hit that subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. It helps me out a lot on the channel. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. We post episodes 3 days a week at the moment during the off season. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday typically is what my schedule will be. So as always, please make sure you go out, subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever it is you listen to your podcast, rate, review, all that good stuff. I do appreciate all of the support that you give me on the podcast. But it is Friday, so we're doing a Mailbag Friday. Got a lot of great questions. I really do appreciate it. Y'all sent in a lot of really good questions that we're going to be answering today on the podcast that I'm really excited about. Again, a lot of them prospect-wise, which I told you my New Year's resolutions. I want to dive into the prospects more, especially, now that I have the time off basically during the lockout, not a lot of major league news going on. And I just don't get a chance during the season, especially this last season. I was covering the Braves and the Brewers. Now I'm strictly focused on the Braves. So I'm excited to dive into more prospect stuff, specifically Braves prospects. So I've been going back. I've got an MILB TV subscription. So I've been going back watching a lot of Mississippi Braves games, Gwinnett Stripers games. So it's been a lot of fun. I really am enjoying it. I wish I had more time to do prospect stuff during the season, but really enjoying the time that I have right now during the offseason to break down all these prospects for the Braves. So we're going to be talking a lot about prospects on today's podcast. In fact, let's jump into the first question here. It comes from Joshua Julian at Joshua Julian 46 on Twitter. Says, who has the brightest future out of Bryce Elder, Jared Schuster, and Spencer Strider? So these were the three pitchers, 3 of the 4 picks taken in the 2020 MLB draft by the Atlanta Braves. And all look very strong. All are very solid prospects right now for the Braves. They did really good in that 2020 MLB draft. And I was already watching Bryce Elder video when Joshua sent in this question. So I just said, well, since he asked about the other 2, I'll watch video on them as well. So I've done that. And actually, if you go over to TomahawkTake.com, I've written up a scouting profile on all 3 of these players now. So if you want to, you can go check that out and see my deeper dive on each player. But Joshua's question specifically is, who has the brightest future out of these 3? And it's very, very different outcomes for all 3 of them, I believe. Bryce Elder, I love that pick in the 5th round. I think he's a very safe bet to be a number 3 or number 4 starter at the big league level. Just seems like a very safe pick to do that. Very A very low ceiling. I don't think he ever gets higher than a number 3 starter, but I think a very high floor as well. As I could see him being a number 4, number 3 starter for a very long time at the big league level. So I love Bryce Elder. I think that's a very strong pick. Jared Schuster, I haven't quite figured out yet, even after doing a deep dive on him. Right now, I kind of see him as a middle of the rotation starter as well. But I think, while I do think that'll happen, I think he'll be a middle of the rotation starter. I'm not as confident as him reaching that ceiling as I am Bryce Elder reaching even his floor. So I still think there's some work to do for Schuster. He still has some development to come in order for him to reach that ceiling. But Spencer Strider has the brightest future out of all three of these. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not hide behind the bush here. I mean, he has the most upside of any of these pitchers. Anytime you throw high 90s, you're going to have a ton of upside and a lot of potential, and people are going to be excited about you. But after breaking all three of them down and reading some articles, there's a great article on Fangraphs. It's really an interview with Spencer Strider and him talking about his pitches. If you haven't checked that out, I linked it in my article on Spencer Strider on tomahawktake.com. I advise you to go check out that article. It's very enlightening and really got you inside the mind of Spencer Strider and really got me more on board with him becoming a very good pitcher at the big league level. So he has the most upside. I believe he has the brightest future. Now, there are still some developmental hurdles for Strider to overcome. Right now, he has blazed through the minor leagues strictly with a high 90s fastball that he will throw 70-75% of the time. That's not going to cut it at the big league level. He's going to have to develop really two pitches. He's got a slurve that he's working on and a changeup as well. He's going to have to develop both of those pitches in order to become a frontline starter. But if he does that, I mean, that is his ceiling, a frontline starter, a number 2, possibly a number 1 in the rotation. I really do think he can be that good as a starter. The only other thing that worries me with him is his size. I believe he's 6 foot, 195. So, not that big for a starter, especially for one who you're hoping can maintain velocity throughout a start and over 170, 75 innings in an entire season. So that worries me a little bit. But on the flip side for Strider, even if he doesn't turn out to be a top of the rotation starter, which again, I think he can be, I think at the very least, he becomes a dominant back of the game reliever, an 8th, maybe even a closer, an 8th inning guy, or maybe even a closer. So that's why I say he has the brightest future, the most upside, because I could see him potentially either becoming a top of the rotation pitcher or a back of the game type reliever, a high leverage reliever. So, I mean, that's pretty good right there. I mean, if those are your ceilings, and I think it's a pretty fair assessment guess that he reaches one of those. If he doesn't make it as a starter, then I think they immediately put him in the bullpen and he becomes a dominant reliever, which is very valuable in today's game, as we all know. So, who has the brightest future? I'd go with Spencer Strider. I think Schuster's still a bit of a question mark, but I think Bryce Elder pitches in the big leagues for many years and is a very solid starter at the big league level. Next question, kind of going off of that, comes from Cade Harrington at Hope Cafe 5 on Twitter. He says, who would you like to see off the 40-man get a chance to round out the rotation? Thoughts on Spencer Strider? I think he's the one. So as much as I just talked glowingly about Spencer Strider, part of me kind of hopes we don't see him at all at the big league level in 2022. As I talked about, I think he has frontline starter potential, but he needs time to not only work up his innings after having Tommy John surgery in 2019, but to develop his other two pitches, to develop that slurve and that changeup. He really needs time in the minors to work on those two pitches and feel more comfortable with them before you bring him back up as a starter. Now, I think there's a possibility that at the end of 2022, you could bring him back up again, like they kind of gave him an audition for in 2021 as a bullpen piece. But as far as 2022 goes, I honestly don't want to see Spencer Strider in the starting rotation unless he all of a sudden just becomes really confident and develops those other two pitches really quickly. But at this point, I want to see him just to continue to focus on that, because when he comes up, I want him to be ready, because I think he can be a top of top of the rotation type of starter. And, right now the Braves, they have 3 really good starters at the top of the rotation that they can lean on. Hopefully you get Mike Soroka back at some point, and you have some other starters there that can fill in. You got a Kyle Wright, Kyle Muller, Tucker Davidson, even Bryce Elder, I think, gets a shot before Spencer Strider does. So Braves has some depth there. They don't have to rush Spencer Strider up there, and I think he needs time to develop those other 2 pitches before they bring him back up as a starter. Now, you asked who would I like to see off the 40-man get a chance to round out the rotation. This might not be the most exciting pick for some of you, but I really hope Kyle Wright gets a shot in the 5th spot in the rotation. For the 5th spot, whatever it may be. Soroka won't be ready to begin the season. As things stand right now, if they don't go out and get another starter, you're going to have 2 spots available. I've already kind of predicted I'd like to see those spots go to Kyle Wright and Tucker Davidson. I'd like to see them get the first shot, depending on what happens in spring training. But I definitely want to see Kyle Wright get one of those spots, building off the good season he had in AAA and based off what he did in the postseason. Does he now have more confidence in his pitches? Can he be more consistent at the big league level? The stuff's always been there. We know that. He just hasn't been able to do it consistently at the big league level. Is now the time for him to do that. I think this is really a make or break type season for him with the Braves. So he's the one for me that I would like to see get a shot to in the rotation to start 2022. Again, you got to prove it in spring training. It's going to be a battle between those guys that I mentioned earlier to win either 1 or 2 of those spots there. But my thought right now is Kyle Wright gets one of those spots. All right, it's the New Year's. That means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include a Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good you will want to eat them. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill, you want to eat healthy, but it gets so boring by like week 3, you might be thinking this is just not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So here's an idea. Go out to your stash right now, your secret candy stash that you have. Throw all that junk away, replace it with a Built Bar. So the next time you get that craving, you reach in, you grab a Built Bar, tastes delicious, just like a candy bar anyway, and they're good for you and tons of flavors to choose from. New flavors coming out all the time at built.com. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 at checkout to use our promo code to get 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCKED15 at built.com to get 15% off your order. All right, next question here comes from Sean Barry at GarnetJag11 on Twitter. He said, would you move Matzik to the closer role? Do you think Snit would even consider making that move? So the second part of your question is the key here. Would Snit even consider making that move? And look, if Brian Snitker, love him to death, if he didn't move Will Smith out of the closer spot in 2021, what makes you think he's ever going to move Will Smith out of the closer spot? Granted, there weren't a ton of great options to replace him with at that time during the season, although Matzik was really good at some points during the regular season, and maybe you could have made the switch then. I just don't see it happening. Right or wrong, Will Smith is going to be your closer in 2022. I can't see it happening. Again, if he didn't make the move in 2021 when that bullpen was having its struggles, I just don't see that ever happening. And, I don't really want to mess with Matzik either. I mean, he's so good in the role that he has right now. And, he has issues with the yips in the past. I mean, you can't be in a more pressured-packed situation than what he has been in the playoffs. And you didn't really see signs of him, folding under the pressure there. But obviously being a closer ramps that up even more. I kind of don't want to mess with that. Do I think he could do it? Yes. Do I selfishly hope he does? Yes, because I have him on one of my deep fantasy teams, but I just don't see it happening. I would love to see him get the shot, but again, if Snitker didn't take Will Smith out of the closer's role in 21, I just can't see him doing it in 22. So I think you leave Matzik right where he is And I hope Smith continues to kind of play it like he did in the postseason, whether it's the 7th inning, their 8th inning. Bring in Matzik when the middle of the lineup or top of the lineup is coming up to bat, whether that be in the 7th inning or the 8th inning. Don't put him in a defined role. Put him in a role where he can have the most impact because he is that dominant of a reliever right now. So, well, I guess the question is, would I move Matzik to the closer role? I would have given him a shot in 21. Again, when Will Smith was struggling, walking the first batter every time out, I would have given Matzik a chance then. So, yeah, if Smith has those struggles again in 22, I would not hesitate to give Matzik a chance in that role. But I think it'll be Smith to start, and I think something would really have to go wrong for Will Smith to him get pulled out of that closer role. All right, next couple of questions here comes from VT00 Murdoch on Twitter. He says, which prospect has the potential to make strides next season? So I'm probably going to do a bigger podcast on this topic later on. I've been kind of building up to that, prospects to watch in 2022. Prospects I think will have the biggest rise. There are some names in mind right now, and I'm still, going back watching video on some of these guys. So this may change as things go on and as I watch more video, but the easy one is Michael Harris. Talked about it. He has the most helium of any Braves prospect right now. Everybody is so high on him, and I get it. I mean, he's a potential 5-tool player. I want to see what he does at Double-A. If he goes into Double-A and just rakes and hits 280, and I'm just saying 280, not even 300, because Double-A South is a hard league to hit in. If he does that, I think his stock is just going to skyrocket even more than it already is. I mean, most people are already on board now with considering him as the top prospect in the system, but I think he has the most potential to rise, even though, again, it's hard to rise past the top prospect in the system. But he does what he did at High A, at Double-A, or even close to that. I'm going to be even more impressed with Michael Harris. I'm even more excited about him as a prospect. But I'm going to mention another bat who played along with Michael Harris last year, and that's Jesse Franklin. Again, I've talked about a lot on the podcast already. Off to a slow start and then kind of pick things up late. A college bat out of Michigan. I think he has a chance in 2022 to make big strides up the Braves prospects rankings. I think he could be, a 20-plus home run hitter in a corner outfield spot, a 270, 280 type hitter. He made those kind of strides late in the year. If that carries over, and again, going to Double-A, very hard league to hit in. If he can do what he did in the second half of the year at High A Rome and do that at Double-A in Mississippi, his stock is going to soar. And then one more I'm going to mention is Freddie Tarnuk. A lot of injuries delayed him and his career path, but he really started to turn it on in 2021. He was a guy that had a lot of upside when the Braves went out and signed him, and he's finally healthy, starting to put that together. If he backs that up in 2022, you're going to see him rise up into the top 10 as far as Braves prospects as well. So I think those are three right now, just off the top of my head, that I think could make big strides in 2022. But again, I'm going to be watching video on all these prospects, and I'll probably do a deeper dive into prospects to watch in 2022 for the Braves. Murdoch also asked about pitching prospects. I kind of already went over that. And then he said, draft-wise, which positions should the Braves target in the 2022 MLB draft? Look, in the first round especially, you take best available. The Braves have really, really shocked some people with what they've done in the last two drafts, especially at the back end, taking college pitchers that were not ranked very highly, but pitchers that had upside. And I get that when you're drafting at the back half of the first round. I can understand trying to take guys who you think have big upside that you can potentially sign under slot and then save that money to go over slot on other players in later rounds. And that's certainly a strategy. And I talked about the 2020 draft, even though it was 4 picks. I mean, it worked out for them there. They got Bryce Elder, way over slot in the 5th round because of the money that they saved on Schuster. So there's a lot of strategy involved in an MLB draft. It's really hard to predict. Like I said, typically you want to try to take the best player available. The Braves have not done that, at least the past 2 years of the draft. So, but for me, you're asking my opinion. Who do I think the Braves should target? I think they need to start going after some more bats. I think the bats in the system are really weak at the moment. Even though I just mentioned Michael Harris and Jesse Franklin, two bats that I'm excited about, the bats are pretty weak right now. Drew Waters hasn't developed like we thought. The bat hasn't come around for Pache like we thought. Langoliers is going to be a good hitter for a catcher. We're talking 250 and 20 plus home runs. I mean, that's very solid for a catcher, but looking for a big impact type bat, you're going to be drafting at the back half of the first round again. It's difficult to project high school bats. I'm not really in favor of taking high school bats in the first round. So I'd go after a college bat. And I know MLB Pipeline just put out their top 100. I believe they did 100 draft prospects for the 2022 MLB draft. So just running down that list real quick, a couple of names that popped out to me in the area the Braves will be drafting is infielder Cade Doughty out of LSU, somebody who's got 20 home run potential, a very good hitter, very good base runner as well, can play all over the infield, could be a super utility type guy, but again, a big hit tool there. And then Florida's Judd Fabian, a player that a lot of people thought could be a top 5 pick in the 2021 MLB draft, had a dreadful season at Florida, and he definitely has some mechanical issues he needs to work on. But we're talking Gold Glove caliber center fielder, just a stud athlete, can hit bombs. I mean, 30 home run potential. So 5-tool type player. I mean, that's the type of player he could be, which is why many thought he could be a top 5 pick in last year's draft. So if he still hangs around that back of the first round type of area, I think that could be a big upside play for the Braves. A lot of swing and miss in Judd Fabian's game, some things he's got to work out. But again, you're talking about, what they've done with the pitchers the last 2 years. They've taken, pitchers that weren't ranked very high, but they saw some upside to potentially be top of the rotation starters. It could be the same for Judd Fabian. You're talking about a guy that maybe won't rank as they have a first round ranking, but if he figures it out, you're talking about a 5-tool, all-star type player. So, for me, I would be targeting some college bats at the back end of the first round. All right, BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, last question of Friday Mailbag comes from Chris Schaff, 84. He says, the 1995 win was special. The 2021 win was amazing. Both seem to define their philosophy, a hardworking team, preserving against the odds, never giving up, and having dedicated fans. Do you feel these factors are why they are loved so much? Is this their legacy? And a great question here, really a deep question to try to unpack. I mean, the easy answer is they're so loved because they won championships. And, especially in Atlanta where, unfortunately those haven't come very often. Those two teams are going to be loved just because they won championships. The 95 team, was a culmination of those early 90s teams, who kind of surprised a lot of people. And then all of a sudden it became, okay, when are they going to win one? So the 95 one is a little bit different, but in a unique way. The Braves were kind of expected to win that World Series then, where, even though I think this current Braves team's on that same trajectory, they won in 2018 when they weren't really expected to. Now they've kind of continued to do so, and you felt like a World Series was coming, but with everything that happened in 2021, you didn't really think this was going to be the team to do it. And then bam, they did it. And they won the World Series with, a bunch of rental players that they got at the deadline. So that to me is what made this 2021 team so different, so unique. And I talked about it with John Magel. I had him on the podcast the other day, and he brought up a great point. It was just it became a team that the city just was excited to see, and players they were excited to cheer for, like Jock Peterson and Eddie Rosario, Jorge Soler. Those were exciting players that brought a lot of energy, a lot of thump to the team. And it just became a team that everybody, it went from a team in the first 4 months of the season that you just cringed watching. It was that hard to watch. And I love the Braves as much as anybody else. It was hard to watch that team. But once they got those guys and that energy, I mean, the team was just rejuvenated. And a lot of it was because of those players and the energy they brought. And it just suddenly became a very fun and fascinating team to watch. But I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, these are both very hardworking teams. I would say more so 2021 was against the odds. An 88 win team. Everybody was kind of writing them off going into the postseason. That bullpen was a big weakness. Again, like John Magel said, it became a huge strength all of a sudden. So I think the 2021 team is more unique and special, even more so than the 1995 team. The 95 team, that was expected. I mean, they had a bunch of Hall of Famers on that team. This 2021 team just exploded and had a great group of characters that everybody could rally around and cheer for. So I think it makes the 2021 team a little bit more unique, but obviously they're both going to have great legacies in the city of Atlanta for winning championships, especially with the drought that they had. They're never going to be forgotten, but I think they are a little bit different in that regard. Great questions today. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for sending all the questions in at LockedOn_Braves. Continue to do so. Continue to answer your questions on the podcast as they come in, or do them on our Friday mailbag episode. So again, make sure you're following the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves so you can be a part of the podcast. Follow me at Shortstop Ball. Subscribe to us on YouTube and rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.